Hey folks, my name is Bill and I'm a developer advocate here at Rerun and super excited to kick off part 4 of the Gentle Introduction series. So in parts 1, 2, and 3, we really just reviewed the very basics, right? Trying to build our conceptual model of how Rerun works, how the different pieces are connected, and doing that by playing around with different visualizations, different notion, or like logging things over time, 3D transforms, and how we can sort of combine these unique properties of Rerun. And I think in this part is where we're gonna bring it all together and you're gonna actually see it play out with really combining all of these different pieces and skills. And so what you should expect after this is, to be honest, I think you're gonna be like pretty prepared to use Rerun after this part. And obviously some of these later parts, we're gonna show off some more sophisticated things, but this is really gonna round out your ability to log data using the SDK, see it in the viewer, and in the rest of the series, we'll talk about how to query that data, how to get it out of Rerun, and then talk about a bunch of different resources. And so with that, what we're gonna do is we'll start off with a very basic animation. This is our last set of kind of synthetic data. And then after this, we're actually gonna do a code review with some real world data. And you're gonna see how all of these things kind of combine, how we've learned all of these different pieces so that you're able to use Rerun. So let's go ahead and dive right in and get it started. So we have some code pulled up here. And this is, as I said, some kind of synthetic code. So let me go ahead and clear this, clean things up. And I want to run Rerun with our example data. So I have run this script, this notions of time here. And what that brings us is a nice little animation of a couple of different dots. And what this really represents is something like a drone, right, that is navigating a space and over time has different sensors that fire at different rates. So in this example, we create a couple of different sort of orientation points, no big deal there. And then basically over time, we are going to, log some slight changes in the position of those points. And every 5th frame, we will log a new GPS point. So you can see that down here. And then every 10th frame, we have some obstacle detection. So, imagine that we have a slower ML model that runs at obviously a slower rate. And so, while these are just bubbles, they're just dots sort of rotating around, the point we're trying to get across here is that we have these different notions of time, right? The IMU sensor has a certain notion of time that updates more frequently than the other ones, right? But what's powerful about Rerun is we are able to take these different, perspectives of time. So we can jump to GPS time, which is much slower. And what we'll do is we'll actually just slow this down just to kind of make the point. So I'll change this to 0.1 here. And, what this shows is that basically, IMU only updates, or rather, when we take the perspective of GPS time, the IMU position will only update at that same rate, right? And so when we've slowed this down, I'm just going to do 5 here. So I'm just slowing it down 2 different ways by changing the frames per second as well as the speed. But you can see here, when we take the GPS time, we get fewer updates, right? If we take the IMU time, we will see IMU updating, waiting for GPS. I guess GPS is the green bubble, and for obstacles to update as well. So of course we can also check out obstacle time, right? Which, here I think we only have 6 different, times at which obstacles were logged because we only have a limited set of frames. And so what I'm really trying to drill home here is that Rerun is going to give you a ton of flexibility when it comes to these different timelines. So let's actually take a look at that. So first of all, we introduced 2 notions of time. There's both sequences, right, which is basically, an ordered set of frames. And actually, I guess of note, it doesn't have to be ordered. And then timestamps, right? So we have 2 different times that we set over time. So here we have like simulation time. So we're on this particular timeline. And what we have here is that for these different, for GPSs, we define a new timeline with a new sequence and a new timestamp. Now, this timestamp is the same as this timestamp, right? And I guess this frame is, I guess more or less these frames. I guess we don't need this 5 division since it's already that base anyways because we have the if statement. But, putting all that aside, basically, that will just be these individual frame numbers for GPS. We can see that's the green bubble here. And then the same applies for obstacle frames. So what we have is the ability to totally control time and, more importantly, kind of align sensors around particular timelines, right? So, if we take a look at the obstacles, right, we're basically taking the perspective, I'll sort of just scrub through here. We are taking the perspective that, there's only one time, the obstacle time, right? And Rerun gives us all of this flexibility where you could be logging from multiple machines that each have their own timelines. You could be bringing all of that data together and then being able to query it as if, in order to sort of bring them up to the same timeline. And this gets into a lot of the power and the flexibility of these different notions of time and the ability for you to control those and understand, what's happening with your particular robot. And so that kind of rounds out this introduction of the notions of time. In the next little segment here, we're actually going to do a code review with some real world data that's going to bring all of this together. Okay, so we are closing out what we have here. Now what we'll do is we will do Python code. So we want to run the step for IMU, which is this data code review. And I kind of want to point out, I downloaded this code manually, but you can see lots of these things in the example. So what I'm actually working with is this IMU I downloaded this code, but you can just grab it right here by going into the recordings subpanel and clicking on examples and then navigating to this IMU signals example. So now that we have that pulled up, let's dive into the code review. This is where things get truly fun. So first, let's take a look at what we're looking at here. And I'll zoom out here. Great. So we have this dancing camera. It's not capturing, say, the most exciting thing, but we can see here that we have some accelerometer measurements, some gyroscope measurements as well. That's happening over time. And we can see it just sort of bounces around more or less. And let's go ahead and look through. So I've ignored some of these functions. This just downloads the data set. This is the entry point to the script. This one downloads the data set. Now let's take a look at the IMU data. So this data set is actually a number of different files. So here we have some text files. And what we do is we read it in as a CSV using pandas. And we're actually going to use this capability called send columns. And what this allows you to do is rather than logging individual points, like we did in here, where we iterate through a list or an array and log individual points, this is going to allow us to send a big batch of both time values, the indexes, basically, and then the actual columns and those column values. And we can specify the same archetype that we have earlier. So basically, we just send this gyroscope data, the accelerometer data, and we don't have to iterate through every little point. Boom, just send all the values, right? And the same I guess here we have to do it image by image since there's a number of images. But this kind of shows you another set of flexibilities around here where you don't have to just have Rerun that connects to, say, the source, the source robot. You can take that data after the fact and put it into Rerun, dump it into Rerun to make it both visualizable, right, as we can see here, and also queryable, which we'll cover in later videos. So here we have a number, I guess there's a little metadata file that lays out the different times. And you'll notice a couple of things. One is we have a 3D transform, right, that allows us to, lay out this, let's see right here, this like pinhole style, where is it here? There we go. That allows us to lay out this pinhole for the exact camera, right? And notice we don't have to log these different positions. This is just a 3D transform, right, from that source origin, right? So that's like the pinhole perspective. And these are all static, right? Those are static properties. Those things are fundamental. They're not going to change over time. But this allows us to really get a sense for that perspective, what's in the world, that kind of thing. So moving right along, we also can log the encoded image. And we can see here, we log the IMU data as well. So we have the WorldCam image. Here's this pinhole static property. So let's go and dive into this here. So we can see all of this. So for this camera, we have the image, we have the transform. You notice the transform starts a little bit later. We have the pinhole properties of resolution, plane, the distance, so on and so forth. And we also get these translations, rotations that we can log over time as well. So you can see here, we specify this time column and log it. And so the key takeaway here is that we can log things sort of row by row, but we can also log them in batches or just send them from other data sources in batches. And we get a lot of flexibility to combine static properties that determine maybe how a camera perceives the world, obviously time series properties that we can send in one big giant batch, and things like 3D transforms to really get a sense for what the robot actually perceives over time. And so with that, when we look at, to bring it back to notions of time, you can see here that these timestamps are not perfectly aligned, right? They are different timestamps, that the images come in at a certain frequency, eyeballing it here. So here's one image at 0.73. Here's another image at 0.78.
A few moments later.
Every 50 milliseconds. And you can see here that even with the accelerometer, that sometimes we have these like little double logs, right? Maybe where the camera grabs the values and forces them to log as well. And Rerun gives us the ability to handle all of these just sort of little tiny differences inside of the viewer, but also at query time. And so with all of that, that's going to round out step 4 here, right? We introduced some new visualization tools like pinhole, 3D transform. We introduced a number of different ways of logging data from row-wise to column-wise. We introduced different notions of time from sequences and timestamps. And with that, you've learned basically a lot of sort of the logging and visualization capabilities that Rerun provides. And so in the next couple of videos, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into how to query this data, how to manipulate it, and then cover some more resources for you to be successful. And so with that, thanks so much for sticking with me, and see you in the next video.